Here's what's coming up on today's show.
If you are saving in a 401k and you don't save enough to get the full match, you just lost money. You left money on the table where you could have benefited yourself.
Welcome to the How Money Works podcast with Craig and Jennifer Moser of Maestro Wealth Advisors, serving you throughout the Triad of North Carolina for more than 30 years.
We're going to talk about 401k mistakes, right? The 401k is a great tool. It's easy and painless, and it's a great way to build our savings, but it's also easy and painless, which means we kind of tend to forget about it a little bit for long periods of time. So let's talk about a few basic places where people can make some mistakes, and that way if they're thinking, hey, I do need to take care of this, let me get on the calendar with you guys, that gives them a place to start, right?
Right.
So let's jump in here. Leaving money behind in the old plan. Let's just start on that one, right? Because a lot of people have these nowadays. More and more, it seems like it's happening more and more. Where people
and
job.
more people these days are job switching. Sure. Even changing states to switch jobs. Our son is getting ready to move from Utah here to North Carolina and change careers and change states. And so the likelihood is, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to move that money. But probably a lot of people just keep plugging money into the 401k and really never look at their statement. Either they're afraid to see what's happening because the market's going up and down, or they really don't have an interest. And so it's even worse when you're even removed from that employer and you're not, it's not in your face, you're not getting those announcements and things being an active participant. You've got that money that you've already put aside. And so it's easy to forget. So that's a problem because a lot of things can happen. One that I thought of immediately was you might have a name change. Maybe you got married, maybe you got divorced, and you never did fix that former 401k to do that. We actually dealt with a client last year that had gone through, I think, 2 name changes by the time. Wow. It's like, wait, how do we do this? How do we roll this money over different names, that kind of thing. And the other thing is your beneficiaries could possibly change. So let's say you weren't married at first and you've got your, parents as the beneficiary, and now you've gotten married and they're not on there. So if you were to pass away, who's going to get that money? Even worse than that, what happens if you were married, now you're divorced and you've got, children or whatever? Do you want that former spouse? Yeah. You want that former spouse to receive those funds or not, or your new spouse? So leaving things behind, putting your head in the sand like that proverbial camel is not the way to go about it.
And you don't have control, right?
There's other things in there too. I mean, mutual funds are great. Don't get me wrong. But typically when you look at a 401k, there's a lot of rules. You have to have so much in each asset class, large, mid, and small. You have to have international. You might have something for real estate. You have a few bond fund choices in there. You have a stable value fund. But typically, they're not extraordinary. I hate to just say that, but they're kind of in the middle of the pack. It's not the middle of the pack of any particular investment. It's just that you're getting a big portfolio, and that's the idea if you buy the large cap growth stock mutual fund. So you really don't have any sort of customization or specialization for you to be able to do within a 401k. But before we quit this, I got to say, what's a good thing? So one of the good things of most 401ks, not the state, but most 401ks, is you get a match. Somebody put some extra money in there. So the other side of this coin is, don't forget, if you are saving in a 401k and you don't save enough to get the full match, you just lost money. You left money on the table where you could have benefited yourself.
So the mistake is not saving to the match, either in your current 401k.
At least to the match.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about people that put it in there and forget it, right? So they never really look at their account, and they really don't see how the market has impacted the allocation in their account. Assuming you're not one of those people that are in the target dated funds and you've actually selected various funds and kind of customized your investment portfolio, what is the market doing to your account? Do you need to trim some off and reallocate or not? Craig, do you have a suggestion on that?
Well, so here's what happens. You start this thing in your 20s. And what's at least the mantra is you can take a lot of volatility. You should be in a more aggressive fund. So when the thing goes down, since you're putting the same amount in every 2 weeks, you buy more shares at the low price, you buy less shares at the higher price, and the average of that over time is really great. And I agree. I think that's wonderful. But if you have put a lot of money in the Super Dyna Whoppin' Tech Fund over years, And then all of a sudden, you're 55, you're 65, and that's where your money's at. And it's a bunch of it. You're really taking a big risk with your entire nest egg by putting it in things that are very aggressive. The aggressive part when it's going up is wonderful. Oh, man. When the markets go up and you're getting at least as much as the market or more, you love it. But if you look at, most of these aggressive accounts, look at 2022. Most of them were down 20, 25, 30% in that year. What if you needed that money that year? You've got to think about, what do I do with the bigger part of the money? Maybe you separate that from what you do with your every 2-week contribution. You can do that. So you can remain aggressive in your investments, but you might allocate the rest of it to maybe a more balanced approach as you get older.
One thing is, some people think about the target dated fund as a way to customize their portfolio for them. And don't think of a target dated fund as a custom plan. It really is tailored to adjust the risk and volatility towards your retirement date. That is really what the optimal goal of the target dated fund is. They're going to make those shifts from one year to the other, reducing the equity positions and increasing the bond positions until that designated retirement date. And that date is stated on the fund name. So if you have a 2025, they're assuming that you're actually going to start needing that money in 2025 and tailor that mix of assets to that retirement date.
Well, Jennifer, let me ask you, though, on that. I think people sometimes feel like that target date funds are going to take them safer to that point you just made, but it doesn't go all the way to zero, right? We shouldn't be, oblivious to that, right? It's just supposed to be reducing some of the risk as it gets closer, correct?
Correct.
And they do that with fixed income choices. Again, that's the whole thing behind that is that selection, well, it's definitely not customized, but what it is it's at least built for saying the young people will be more aggressive and the older people will have more fixed income in their account,
right,
which by definition typically is not as volatile.
Gotcha.
I do want to touch on one other mistake that we see, and that is really thinking that their 401k has minimal costs associated with it. There is no free lunch in life, right? So in a 401k, I did some research before this segment. The average cost of a 401k to a participant is 2.22%, and this comes from smartasset.com. If you ever do any surfing on the web, you'll probably see Smart Asset come up a lot. They do a lot of analysis and know the pulse of the investor market out there. Even though the average fee is 2.22%, most 401k account holders will, pay a fee anywhere from 0.2 to 5%. So there's a wide range out there. And really that wide range depends upon the size of the account that you have and the provider of that account. So what are these fees that could go up to as much as 5% that you don't see? Well, one's investment fees, another's plan administration fees, and the other is called individual service fees. Now, the Department of Labor basically says that the fees have to be reasonable, but they don't cap any of these fees. So they're out there, but they don't really cap anything. They just say it has to be reasonable. Investment fees are the largest segment of those fees, and that really is the cost of the investment management and other investment-related services. You've heard things called, expense ratios, sales loads, or any other type of additional costs. That is that component. Usually that's passed on to the participant with a percentage of their assets under management of their account. So if I have an account that has $20,000 in an account and Craig has one that's $200,000, we're going to have the same percentage applied, but he's paying more in fees because he has a larger balance. The plan administration fees are basically things that cover general management, like record keeping, accounting, legal, and trustee services. Sometimes the employers will pay this fee, but it's usually passed on to the participant in the form of either a flat fee that you'll see or, again, a percentage of your balance. The last is that individual service fee, and those are really those optional things that you may do. Let's say you take a loan out. Let's say you do a rollover. So those are those flat fees per service that you might incur on the account. So again, there's no free lunch. And these fees typically come up, Craig, when we look at a client that has either reached maybe 59 and a half, where they can do an in-service distribution. They've got this big bolus of money, and they're like, oh my gosh, the market is, making this thing shake all around. Do I really want that volatility? But they say, oh, but it's so cheap to do a 401k. Well, when you dig deeper, it may not be cheaper than actually pulling that money, rolling it into an individual retirement account, and having that professionally managed and more diversified and more tailored to not only the needs in the 401k, but your overall financial affairs. And that's really the benefit of doing those rollovers. So if you're leaving your employer, look at that IRA rollover as a potential, or roll it into your existing 401k in your new employer. Or if you're 59 and a half and can do an in-service distribution before you can retire, then maybe you want to do that as well to diversify. And that's what we're here for.
Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, remember, you can get a complimentary financial review with the team at Maestro Wealth Advisors by calling 336-448-1086 or go online to howmoneyworksradio.com for other great resources and ways to reach the team. You can also check the show notes of today's episode for our contact information as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the most popular apps. For Craig and Jennifer Moser, I'm Mark Killian. We'll talk to you next time on the How Money Works podcast.
Craig Moser is a financial advisor and certified financial planner. Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through Avantax Affiliated Insurance Agency.